Yo, what's up guys? We're back with another video today. And in today's video, guys, I'm going to be talking about something that I feel like, especially right now, needs to be talked about. Some of the worst UFC pay-per-views in recent years. Part of this is inspired because a lot of UFC events recently, most of it is from like UFC Fight Night cards, but some of it is from pay-per-views. One of them you see on screen right now have just been really lacking like any substance, any good fights. Like they're just like, there's not that many good things apart from like the championship fights, and even then some of these championship fights aren't even that good. So I have selected a couple of the worst UFC pay-per-views in recent years. So without further ado, let's get into them. Alright, now the first card we have is UFC 312. This one is a little bit cheating, guys. I kind of get it, but at the same time, when you look at this card is so bad. There is not a single ranked fighter on this whole card. I'm only showing you guys the main card, but like on the main card, you should have at least one ranked fight. This card, all of the other cards at least have one ranked fight, I'm pretty sure, in some way, shape, or form, but this card literally has 0 ranked fighters. None of these guys are anywhere close to the rankings. The only ranked fighters on this whole card are the championship fights, those being Sean Strickland and Tatiana Suarez. They are the only 2 ranked fighters on this entire card, which I'm pretty sure there are like 14 or 13 fights on this whole card. Let that sink in. 2 ranked fighters of 12 fights at UFC 313. Isn't that crazy? That's crazy, isn't it? And yes, I do know that this fight hasn't happened yet. And maybe some of these unranked fights are actually bangers. Maybe they're actually some good scraps. Some of them I think are going to be, but those are going to be the prelims. I just know that none of these main card fights, especially for the unranked ones, they're going to be any good. Maybe there'll be some finishes, but I don't see anything special from this whole card. Apart from like Dricus and Sean Strickland. That is literally the only reason I'm going to be watching the card, because of Dricus and Sean Strickland. And I will say it again, like everyone has said, Sean Strickland should have not gotten the title shot. It should have been Khamzat, because Khamzat submitted Robert Whittaker. Nobody does that to Robert Whittaker, guys. Nobody does that to Robert Whittaker. Alright, now the next card we have, UFC 289. Nunes, you know, she's the greatest female fighter of all time. It's pretty clear. But let's be honest. Let us be honest here. If Charles Oliveira and Beneil Dariush was not on this card, would you have paid for it? I mean, I didn't. I pirated it. But you get the point. You get the point. Like, okay, let's look at the card. We have Amanda Nunes versus Andrea Lina as the main event. It was an alright fight, whatever. She retired. I guess there was some reason to watch it. Then you have the co-main, Charles Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush. And remember, guys, this was after Charles Oliveira lost his belt to Islam Makhachev, and there was a lot of like questioning about Charles Oliveira, so there was a lot of anticipation for this fight. And then after that, we get to Mike Malott versus Adam Fidget. I mean, this was a Canadian card, so they're gonna put Mike Malott on the main card. And realistically, he's probably like the best Canadian fighter of the entire UFC roster, which is kind of sad because he's not even ranked. And he got finished by Neil Magny. How do you get finished by Neil Magny? Come on. And then we have Dan Ige versus Nate the Train. Okay, that's a decent fight. That is a decent fight I would put on a main card. Not much I can complain there. It was a good fight. And then we have Marc-Andre Barut versus Eric Anders. That's like an early prelims fight, to be honest. Let's be real. Or like on a prelims fight. Like half of these fights, like both Mike Malott and Adam Fidget and Marc-Andre versus Eric Anders should be prelim fights. Like, come on. And again, I'm not trying to discredit Amanda Nunes and all that stuff because she's the main event, but realistically, would you have complained if Charles Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush was the main event and Amanda Nunes was like the co-main event? I'm not trying to discredit her or her like career, but at the same time, right, after the Charles Oliveira fight, after he finished Beneil Dariush, I just stopped watching the card because I had no interest in Amanda Nunes' fight, to be honest. I'm sorry, I like Amanda Nunes, but I'm just not interested to stay up till like 1 o'clock to watch a women's main event in a fight that I know Amanda Nunes is going to win. Alright, now the next card we have is UFC 270. I mean, this card wasn't bad or anything, but it was just so meh. Like, I feel like there just wasn't... I feel like especially this card had a lot of anticipation because Ngannou was coming back from an injury and he had beef with Dana White in the UFC and all that stuff. and there was a lot of pressure on Ngannou to win this fight against Ciryl Gane, which he did, but the fight between them wasn't that interesting. It was kind of just meh. Like, it wasn't boring, I would say, but it wasn't like anything spectacular. And it was arguably a Ciryl Gane win. It was a very close fight. I give it to Ngannou, but I can see why some people may say Ciryl Gane, but I give it to Ngannou in my opinion. And then like the best fight after this, which was the co-main, Davison Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno. It was actually a pretty solid fight, but that was like the only good fight on this whole card. And then when you look at the other fights, you have Michael Pereira versus Andre Filo, Cody Stamann versus Sig Nurmagomedov, Michael Morales versus Travis Gills. Half of these guys I don't think anyone knows, to be honest. I just found out who Andre Filo is. I just found out who Cody Stamann is. But yeah, guys, besides from the co-main and main event, most of the other guys here, most of them, like Michael Pereira, Said Nurmagomedov, Michael Morales, are more bigger names now. But back then, they weren't that big of a name, to be honest. Besides, like, Michael Pereira, because he does all those, like, crazy moves and all that stuff. But, like, I didn't know who Michael Morales was or Said Nurmagomedov was back in 2022. But overall, this card was just, like, it wasn't bad or anything. It wasn't great as well. It was just, like, a meh card, to be honest. Alright, the next card we have, UFC 279. Here's the thing about this card, guys. This card was originally supposed to be even worse than what it was before, because it was supposed to be Nate Diaz versus Khamzat Chimaev, which would have been a lamb slaughter. I love Nate Diaz. He's one of my favorite fighters, but he would have gotten smoked by Khamzat Chimaev. Then it was supposed to be Tony Ferguson versus Li Jingyang, which was alright. It would have been alright. And then it was supposed to be Kevin Holland versus Daniel Rodriguez, which would have been alright, but honestly, the fact that Khamzat missed weight actually made the card a lot better, because instead we had Nate Diaz versus Tony Ferguson, which was too soon, too late, but it was alright. We then had Khamzat Chimaev versus Kevin Holland, which was actually a spectacular performance from Khamzat Chimaev. And then we had Li Jingyang versus Daniel Rodriguez, which was a robbery. A lot of people think Li Jingyang won that fight. And Li Jingyang got screwed over so bad. He had if you know, you guys might know, he had a great suit on. He was so excited to go to the press conference. Press conference gets canceled. He then has to fight a new opponent on like what, a day's notice, and then arguably wins that fight and then gets robbed of it. You gotta feel bad for Li Jingyang, man. This guy got screwed over so bad by the UFC. And then after that, we have Andre Lina versus Marcy Kaysen, and it was a catch weight as well, because they missed weight. And then you had Johnny Walker versus Alan Kubela, which actually was like a solid fight. And it was nice seeing Johnny Walker get the win. But still, like, overall, the card got better, but it was still like a very weak card. Alright, and the last one I have on here, UFC 272. The main event was boring, first of all. Like, the build-up was great, because these two were from friends to enemies. But the fight itself was pretty meh. It was just a bunch of wrestling. It was a one-sided beatdown. Well, not beatdown, but it was just one-sided. Colby Covington was using his wrestling to win the fight, which was yada. It was pretty boring. And then we had the co-main. The co-main was RDR versus Renato Moicano. And keep in mind, this was before Renato Moicano was a big name. Nowadays, he's a big name, but back then he wasn't. And to make this even weirder, these guys were both at welterweight. Both of them were unranked. And it was a 5-rounder. Like, excuse me, this was a 5-rounder? Definitely, and both of them were unranked. I have no clue why this was a 5-rounder co-main for a card that was already weak. Like, we had Colby Covington versus Jorge Masvidal as the main event. We then had Rafael Dos Anjos versus Renato Moicano as the co-main, which was also a 5-rounder. I'm still so confused about that. Then we have Edson Barboza versus Bryce Mitchell. Okay, that's a solid one on there. We then had Kevin Holland versus Alex Oliveira. Don't know who Alex Oliveira is. I'm going to be straight up honest with you. Then we had Sergey Spivak versus Greg Hardy. I mean, it's always nice to see Greg Hardy get KO'd, to be honest. I don't think anyone likes that dude. So I guess overall this is more of a fight night card, to be honest. When I look at this card, if you made this a fight night card, I would actually say this was a great fight night card. But the fact that this was a pay-per-view, I'm sorry, I can't, you can't tell me I'm paying for this card. The only reason you'd pay for this card is because of Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal. Because remember, this was still when Jorge Masvidal and Colby Covington were still big names. They hadn't fallen off like dramatically like they are now, they were still relatively up there when it came to their skill level and their hype and momentum and all that stuff. And this card was like, yeah, it's just not that good. If they made this a Fight Night card, I would not be complaining. Honestly, I arguably would be saying this would be one of the better Fight Night cards in recent years, to be honest. But to make this as a pay-per-view, I'm sorry. This is like a pay-per-view that the UFC would have made back in like 2015 and 2016, to be honest. Because those pay-per-views back then were just not good. But guys, that is me covering some of the worst UFC pay-per-views in recent years. Let me know what you guys think were some of the worst UFC pay-per-views in recent years. Leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Peace!